You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another Random Thoughts. I thought I'd talk today about what I consider to be some of the worst parts of the Dragon Ball community. There's going to be other subjects that are kind of related here, and there's actually a specific thing that made me want to make this video, but I didn't think it was merited enough, and merit is ironic, given what it is, to make its own video. I guess I'll start with that, and that's with some stuff that Captain Hardluck said. Yes, I know, merit, very funny. He said in a mutual server that he was making the comparison, because I largely agreed with the sentiment of what he was saying, but what he was actually saying was a bad comparison. Because there was a guy ranting about Mystery Science Theater 3000, which was fucking stupid. I don't know why he was ranting so much about that. And obviously I'm with Hardluck on this about Mystery Science Theater being a net good for those bad movies, because they're much more well known because of it. But he tried to make the comparison that Dragon Ball Super wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for DBZA Abridged, or Dragon Ball Z Abridged, which I just completely disagree, because Toriyama literally made Battle of Gods as a response to the reception and legacy that Dragon Ball Evolution had left. Then he brought up the fact that it was 4 years apart, but it's like, 4 years is plenty of, like, that makes sense to me for a time frame of a big budget anime movie, but whatever. But he tried to say that, like, Dragon Ball would be a lot less popular if it wasn't for Abridged, and I acknowledge that Abridged brought in new people, but not good. And you know, there are some things with Super that are somewhat similar to Abridged, like Goku's fucking retarded in Abridged, and he is in Super as well. But to act like Dragon Ball, one of the biggest fucking media franchises of all time, is literally only successful because of a fucking fan parody is just to be stupid. And to act like it's on the same level as if Dragon Ball Z Abridged popularized Dragon Ball Z, which again was already one of the most popular media franchises, period, not just anime, is fucking retarded to me. And like, he literally accused Toriyama of being a liar when I mentioned that Toriyama said that he made Battle of Gods as a response to Dragon Ball Evolution. And then he got it wrong and thought that there was a Battle of Gods manga, which there wasn't until the Super manga, which came out in 2015 after the Battle of Gods movie. Now, I'm okay with getting shit wrong. Everybody gets shit wrong from time to time, but with how confident he said it and then had to immediately backpedal because he fucking Googled it, it was really funny. That was the one that made me want to make this video. But again, I didn't think that was enough for a full video. So let's continue down that path and talk about Dragon Ball Z Abridged, because that itself is, in fact, a pretty big problem, I think, with the Dragon Ball fan base. First off, I already have a fucking issue with people who watch Z and nothing else. They don't watch Original, and they sure as hell don't watch GT. But they watch Z, and that's like it. And then maybe they'll watch Super. But it's like, if you're gonna watch Z and not Original, then there's something wrong with you. Like I said, I've started with Z when I watched through it all the way through. But I technically saw the King Piccolo saga years and years before that. The people who only watch Z and are obsessed with just Z and act like Z can do no wrong and has nothing wrong with it, drive me up the fucking wall. And another thing with Z fans that drives me nuts is they like the bad filler but not the good filler. Like, they're fine with the filler that drags on fights. They don't really consider that filler in their head, like the fucking, 19 episodes of Goku fighting Frieza for quote-unquote 5 minutes. They don't view that as filler. But they would view all the, development with Gohan and Piccolo as filler, because it's not in the manga either, right? There's a lot of genuinely great filler in Dragon Ball Z. And a lot of the times I actually prefer the tone of the filler over the main episodes in a lot of ways, because it's more similar to that of Dragon Ball. But, yeah, Z fans drive me nuts, but, Dragon Ball Z Abridged fans drive me even more nuts. Because, look, I like Abridged. It's not, I don't like it maybe as much as a lot of people do. I do like a lot about it. I don't hate it like some of the hardcore Dragon Ball fans do. I genuinely think it has some really funny moments. But at the same time, the people who view it as a legitimate form of the show are just crazy to me, because there's so many things that are radically different. Like, several characters have entirely different personalities in Abridged than they do in any version of the show. Like, you can argue, oh yeah, there's dub changes and stuff like that, but nothing as substantial as the shit in Abridged. Not to mention, again, with Hardluck saying that Abridged was the main thing, Toei was actively hostile. Fucking hostile to Abridged. They fucking tried to sue them, and they copyright struck them into oblivion all the fucking time. which obviously I'm not for. I don't think that making Abridged was anything wrong. Like, I don't like the people at Team 4 Star, mainly because of ideological differences. There's a lot of things I don't like about them on that level. But I don't think they did anything wrong in regards to making Abridged. But I do think the effect it had on the fan base, because again, it did have an effect. I don't think it was the whole reason Super happened, although if it was, then hey, I could blame it for it, because Super fucking sucks, except the movies. Super has good movies. Really good movies. But I highly doubt that a Japanese company making movies in Japanese theaters gave any thought to an American web series other than, hey, let's take them down because they're using our copyrighted material and fair use doesn't exist in Japan. But the effect that it did have on the fan base, as small as it may be, because I think it's a lot smaller than people give it credit for, is it just brought on a few people there's a whole new class of Dragon Ball fan that have only seen Abridged. They haven't fucking seen the actual show, or read the manga, or any of that. They've just seen Abridged. And so they have all these fucking misconceptions that just aren't true. Like, they think Goku's much stupider than he is. And again, if Abridged had any effect on Super, then it would be that, because Goku's fucking retarded in Super, too. But, again, also, Dragon Ball had, like, tons of video games that were being made for decades. Like, to act like Abridged was, like, the one thing that made it popular is retarded. But again, that's a whole tangent. Again, I don't think that was enough for its own video, but it was the reason I wanted to make this one. But the Abridged fans do drive me nuts with a lot of their misconceptions. Like I said, though, I do enjoy Abridged. It is fine. But it's not just the Abridged people that I don't like, and I'm talking about the people who make and voice it. I also hate the localizers. Like, I can't stand Funimation. All of the people, most of the voice actors who work at Funimation are very high and mighty and full of themselves and think that we owe them something because they entertained us. It's like, no, you owe us, bitch, because you're only famous because of us, because of people watching your garbage. Like, voice actors in the anime scene in the US, and just in the West in general, are fucking assholes who are full of themselves. And, like, not in, like, a fun, endearing way, either. They genuinely think they're hot shit when they're just part of a fucking, like, anime community. Like, anime's mainstream, but it's one of the more, like, kind of cringe mainstream things. Like, granted, mainstream in general is pretty cringe. And when people act like anime's not mainstream, they're just fucking wrong, too, because it absolutely is. But, like, obviously I also don't like what they did to Vic Mignogna, because Vic Mignogna's such a fucking nice guy. From everything I've ever seen about Vic Mignogna, he is a fucking sweetheart. And Funimation did him dirty. They fucked him over so hard. Tried to slander him in all these terrible ways. And then they get their own accusations thrown against them, which is like, it almost feels like karmic justice. Like, obviously I don't like the fact that allegations get thrown around. And, you know, I don't know which ones are true and which ones aren't true, because I typically assume that they're not true unless proven otherwise, because I believe in innocent until proven guilty, even if I don't like the bastard. But Vic Mignogna literally did nothing wrong, like, as far as in the legal sense, right? Which is why it was not something that they took to court, because they knew they couldn't get him on anything legally. They just slandered the hell out of him, and then, unfortunately, he lost the defamation case, because defamation cases are really fucking hard to win, especially if you're a public figure. But yeah, I can't stand Funimation either, so that's another big portion of the fan base that I obviously don't like. They're not the fan base, but they're part of the community. They lead to the fan base. And there's a lot of the fan base, fan creators that have kind of ties to Funimation or kind of on friendly terms with them, and that kind of bugs me too, obviously. Like, you know, like ones like Geekdom 101 and stuff like that, they're all obviously, like, in the same camp. Like, there's a lot of the Kick Vic crowd in the fan base, I guess is what I'm getting at, and that drives me nuts. It's not something you hear about a ton anymore, because that drama's already sort of subsided, but, you know, after destroying the man's fucking career. Not to mention, you know, sprinkling in political messages and shit that weren't there originally. Like, that's something that localizers have been doing a lot more lately, and it's very frustrating. Not to mention, they all have the same generic fucking opinions, too. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another part of the fan base I don't like. I can't stand fucking the fact that people are so obsessed with canon when Toriyama never used the word himself and didn't give a shit about any of that. Like, he just wanted to write a fun adventure story. Like, Toriyama wrote gag mangas. Dragon Ball is the first one that sort of became serious later on, like with the Z chapters, because it wasn't originally Z in the manga in Japan. I'm sure everybody and their grandmother already knows that. But Toriyama liked to write fun little comedies with a bit of adventure. And that's why Dragon Ball is so good, especially the original Dragon Ball. But everyone acts like canon is such this big deal, and Toriyama contradicts himself all the time in his writing. Like, there are so many plot holes and inconsistencies in Dragon Ball that you just gotta kind of deal with it if you're a fan of the series. So to obsess over what is and isn't canon, I think, is just pointless. Because first off, granted, I have my own views on canon. I think we all do to a degree, right? Like, I'm just as guilty of this in some regards because I view the canon as Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, which again is controversial as hell because a lot of people don't like GT, and there are some inconsistencies. But guess what? There's inconsistencies in all three fucking series, and there's a hell of a lot more inconsistencies in Super, which I literally do not view as being possible of being canon. Even though Toriyama viewed it as the legitimate successor, even though it still takes place before the end of Z and directly contradicts several elements of the end of Z. But a lot of the fan base just acts like if Toriyama had any involvement with it, it somehow can't be bad. And, like, look, I love Toriyama. He was a great author. I've had my gripes with some of his writing before. I think I straight up said I hated him at one point in one of my videos, but obviously I don't actually hate him. He's a nut with the way he wrote. He wrote shit in ways that drove me up the wall, but it was also fun. And when I actually read his actual body of work, it's fucking great. So obviously I like Toriyama, but there are things that he did that did drive me nuts with a lot of his inconsistencies. And I like his older writing a hell of a lot more than his newer writing. I did a whole video dedicated to Toriyama when he passed. We lost a legend. He was a fucking legendary manga author. He is objectively one of the best and most influential manga authors there are. But that doesn't mean that he can't write something bad. There are things that are in the manga that are nowhere near as good as they are in the anime. For instance, History of Trunks is way, way fucking better in the anime special / movie, The History of Trunks, than it is in the manga side story that he wrote. For instance, Trunks turning Super Saiyan isn't really a big thing in the manga version. He just kind of does it at the start, instead of the impactful moment he does it at the end. Like, it's night and day different. Not to mention, Pilaf doesn't show up until the end of the Pilaf arc in the manga. Like, he's hardly in it. But he's in it all over the place in the anime, which is why I think that overall the filler is good. There's some filler that's bad. Like I said, when they drag out fights, that's bad. And I've talked about that in my Talking About Filler video. And there's obviously, like, arcs of filler that I don't like Garlic Jr. I mean, that's the only one I can really think of, because I fucking love the other filler arcs, like the Otherworld Tournament. But yeah, there's a lot of opinions and shit people have in the fan base that drive me nuts. Like, people thinking that Goku has no character development, which just doesn't make any sense to me. I think the Buu Saga gets far too much hate as well. The Buu Saga is fucking great. Like, it's a mess. I'll acknowledge the Buu Saga is a mess. It has so much shit crammed into it, and it's all over the place. And, there are some parts of it that are legitimately poorly written. But overall, it's fun, and there are still enough good elements to still make it, like, one of my favorite sagas. Like, it's legitimately my second favorite saga of Z. But I'll tell you, the worst fucking parts of the fan base are Super fanboys. Fanboys who act like Super literally did nothing wrong and how there's nothing bad about Super and nothing of it's contradictory, despite all the stuff that very clearly is. Like, Super fanboys will fucking white knight the hell out of it and then hate on GT when it had way less inconsistency. Like I said, obsessing over canon is already kind of cringe when you're talking about cartoons like these. But at the same time, I do like me some continuity, so like I said, I'm just as guilty of it in some ways. But Super's bad. Like, it's legitimately bad. The movies are great. I love the Super movies, with the exception of Resurrection F, which I think is just kind of mid, if that. It's one of the lesser Dragon Ball movies, for sure. But it's crazy to me how Super fanboys will white knight the hell of it, and they'll also act like Toriyama was way more involved with it than he was. Because Toriyama had only slightly more involvement with Super than he did with GT, because he outlined some stuff in GT, came up with a couple of characters, and came up with the concept. And then with Super, he gave an outline and a manuscript. Like, he didn't actually write down a script. He just kind of gave them a list of these kind of things. These are bullet points. These can happen. It's not like he fucking wrote it. Conversely, the Super movies he was much more directly involved with, which is why I think they're actually the best parts of Super. So there you go. See, even then, Toriyama's writing is a lot better when he's directly involved and not when other people are going off his notes. Not to say that Toriyama has to be involved, because like I said, I like GT more than Z, which I know is a fucking hot take. But that's another thing. A lot of the fan base hate on GT without even having fucking seen it, which is just ridiculous to me. Like, a lot of them bandwagon. There are people who've genuinely seen it and hate it, and I get that. Like, if people genuinely have opinions on it, whatever. If they, like, you know what I mean? But, like, a lot of the time, people just hate it because it's cool to hate it. But yeah, this has been very rambly and all over the place, but I hope it was enjoyable to some degree. Like I said, I love Dragon Ball, and I like a lot of the fan base too. There's a lot of cool fan stuff I like. I do like Toyotaro, even though he's writing the Super manga, and the Super manga is actually worse than the anime from what I've heard. But he did write the original Dragon Ball AF, and I think it's really cool that he got put into Dragon Ball Super as the, successor to Toriyama in a way. And I like some of the other fan projects, like I like Dragon Ball Absalon. And, there's other little things here and there. And the games are fun, too, which, obviously the games are not fan projects, but still. Nevertheless, I just thought I'd get this out there. Just wanted to kind of ramble about Dragon Ball. I hope this wasn't too boring. Have a good one. Toodle!